Hi everybody. I promised on the earlier lesson when we did concise writing as part of week 6 that I would give you guys some answers for those exercises. Now, if you haven't done the exercises, and in case you're wondering, these were the exercises posted as part of the package right here. So if you didn't haven't done them yet, feel free to pause the video, go back and give them a shot. If you don't feel like doing them and you just want to watch the video, that's fine too. So let's make this a little bit bigger, page width. First thing I want to do is just briefly review the 6 guidelines that we looked at. And we can see that we have a handout here that summarizes them for us. So first of all, guideline number 1 is to eliminate unnecessary framing phrases at the beginning of sentences as much as possible. Number 2 is to avoid filler words. Number 3 is to avoid dummy pronouns, and that means something very specific. Number 4 is to eliminate unnecessary repetition or redundancy, and to only use repetition intentionally when we absolutely want to for effect. Number 5 is to use action verbs as much as possible and to avoid linking verbs where we can. And number 6 is to use plain language, to use word choices that are very direct and simple and language that anyone would be able to understand. So the first thing I want to say, I went through these very quickly just now. If it's your first time looking at these, make sure to go back to the week 6 lesson because I go over these 6 guidelines in much more detail there. And you can listen to the audio on the slides to get the full explanation of how these things work. So let's take a look at these exercises. Here's the first sentence. It should be clear to all keen observers that the results of the American general election will have quite a sizable impact on the world, including on Mexico and also probably on Sweden and most likely on Turkmenistan. So the first thing we can notice right at the very beginning is that we have a dummy pronoun. Remember, dummy pronouns are usually going to be it or their. And a dummy pronoun happens when we have a pronoun, but it's not taking the place of any specific noun. It's not like it is referring to a specific object or building or place. It doesn't stand in for anything, and that's something we want to avoid. Now, there's an even bigger problem in this part. It should be clear to all keen observers that, well, this is really a framing phrase. This is something that's been thrown on to the beginning of this sentence to try to make it seem more confident, maybe. But what it actually ends up doing is it just ends up distracting the reader from the real message that you're trying to communicate. So rule number 1 was we can try to avoid framing phrases. So let's get rid of that. Now this is the main part we want to focus on. The results of the American general election will have quite a sizable impact on the world. Okay. Now we can get rid of some filler words, words that don't really need to be there. Sizable, quite a sizable. And if we think about the repeating words, redundancy, which was, I think, rule number 4, here it says the results of the American general election. Well, it seems pretty clear that if we're talking about the American general election and the impact it will have, that we're talking about the results. That part is not really adding anything to the meaning, so we can actually take that right out and say the American general election will have an impact on the world. Now, remember that rule number 5 is to use action verbs. So instead of using the noun form of an action, will have an impact, we can use the verb form, which is to impact. So the American general election will impact the world. Now we have this final part, including Mexico and also probably Sweden and also most likely Turkmenistan. Now, if we think about this list of three countries, then we can see that it's not really talking about them specifically. It's just giving examples of different countries that are in the world. Not only is it Mexico, Sweden, and Turkmenistan, but every country will be impacted. So this is not really adding anything. And we can take that out and we can say something like this. The American general election will impact the world. Now we want to make sure that we retain the same meaning as we had. So it did say a sizable impact. So we could add, say, an adverb here. The American general election will impact the world enormously. Now, a couple things I want to say here. First of all, don't stress out, don't feel bad in any way if your sentence looks different from what's here. Of course your sentence will be different. These are just editing strategies that can help us improve our writing. But you will, of course, have done it in your own way. You'll have internalized these rules and you'll have applied them in a way that is unique to your writing, and that's great. So it doesn't matter if you have the exact same sentence, as long as your sentence is looking clearer, more direct, and more concise than it was originally. And we can see here that this sentence is about half the length, less than half the length of what it was before. Okay. Let's take a look at the next one. It is my objective to utilize more fully and satisfactorily both my university educational experience and my skills as an editor, preferably in a full-time employment position with your firm. So first of all, notice we don't have a framing phrase this time, but we do have a dummy pronoun. It doesn't refer to anything specifically. So the first thing we want to do is we want to